Okay, I'll be so for real, I'm completely restarting this video. I originally recorded the entire thing and it was just boring. So I am redoing all of the voiceover, yay! If you have OCs, you've probably redesigned them a few times. Unless you've maybe just started creating them, and even then, I know when I was younger, I redesigned my OCs like a million times. And to be honest with you, that really hasn't changed at all. So we're doing that again. This time though, with an actual character design pipeline, like the stuff I got a degree for. I want to use it, I want to use the degree, because I can't get a fucking job. At least not a job that actually uses my degree, so I'm gonna fucking use it here. Okay, here's how this is gonna work. I'm gonna be redesigning Alaric, Aymeric, and Lorraine, who are all characters who are in my animatics. I'll be summarizing who they are, as well as some extra story bits that maybe weren't covered in the animatics, and use that to explain my design process. I'll also be fully rendering each design, and given that there's 6 of them, yeah, this took a little while. Also, I feel a little awkward saying this, but if you end up enjoying the video, please like and subscribe. I worked incredibly hard on this, and I'd really appreciate it. Oh, I'd also like to say that I currently have commissions open, and for the entirety of December, they are 25% off. I gotta plug my shit somewhere, man. Alright, this is Alaric. He's the ruler of this kingdom right here, Elonson. He's also the main character of Along Came a Spider. That animatic centered around Alaric realizing that he has the curse that has plagued his family for as long as any of them can remember. And as you see, he does not take that very well. He believes that the curse is caused by the gods, as do many people who have it, and he thinks that severing that connection between his family and the gods may get rid of the curse, which is why he then goes and kills all of them. It's a little edgy, but I had a lot of fun making it, so I don't regret any of it. This curse is called the Reclamation Curse. To keep it short, a bunch of vines sprout from the person's body, along with other effects like memory loss or literally warping the way their body looks. And you can especially see this with Alaric as he becomes unnaturally tall in the 12 years after Along Came a Spider occurred. In Ouroboros, you see part of what he's done in those last 12 years, which is experiment on the dead bodies of other cursed people, as he's moved from theological means of removing the curse to scientific ones. And has he been successful? Absolutely not. Every day he feels his curse growing stronger and stronger, and knows that if he doesn't find a solution eventually, it will completely take him over. As you can probably imagine, his mental state is not great. Not only because of the curse, but also, he murdered his entire family. And while on the surface he believes he did the correct thing, there is still a part of him that deeply, deeply regrets what he's done. That doesn't, however, stop him from hunting down his lost sister, Lorraine, who is the girl that escaped at the end of Along Came a Spider. Oh, and he also does his kingly duties running the kingdom, but that just kind of takes a back seat to everything else he has going on. While he isn't a tyrant, he is certainly neglectful. But he understands that if people rebel against him, that'll be the end of his research. So he's positioned himself as a people's savior, which isn't hard because he's working on a cure to a curse that affects a significant portion of the population, though he never tells his subjects what he's doing behind the scenes, of course. And alright, those are the 2 designs I got for him. Next, I'll be rendering them out fully and talking about why I made certain choices. We are starting off with Alaric's armor. I'll be honest, I already had a really good idea of what I wanted going into this, as you probably saw in the previous part of this, so I didn't change a whole lot about his design. I kind of just updated certain parts and adjusted it slightly so that I felt it was a bit more fun and interesting to draw. Namely, I added a lot more pointy bits, I guess you could call them, specifically around the pauldrons, as well as the... what are these called? Paulanes? And coaters? I don't know how to pronounce these. Some of the other things I updated were the insignias as well as other embellishments on his armor. The cross-like bits are the crest of Elonson, which is a bastardized version of the original crest, which looks like this. It is very much inspired by Catholicism. Alaric's whole deal is inspired by Catholicism. And to go with that theme, I added these little pointy bits, actually embellished into his armor that are meant to allude to Gothic architecture, as Elonson is insanely inspired by that. The rest of the changes were pretty much just making sure that the armor could be believable as real armor, as I personally find that more interesting than armor that is purely fantastical. To make sure that was the case, I specifically referenced 15th century Germanic armor, which is also called Gothic armor, as I believe that just refers to the period. The choice behind this stemmed from I really like how the overall silhouette looks and the cinched little waist. I think it's lovely. And also a little bit goofy at some angles, but I gave him a cape in order to distract a little bit from that. So unlike Alaric's armor, Alaric's day clothes I had not designed concretely until now. Which means that finally they were more inspired by the story itself rather than me just wanting a really specific aesthetic. Though I did still want a very specific aesthetic. So to start, Alençon has a very temperate climate similar to France, so I figured I had quite a bit of free reign there, and I decided that I really wanted their clothing to be loose and flowy, and also often made of silk, as well as lace, and I actually plan to go back to this design and render in a little bit more of that. But for now, I also gave him a cape to mimic his armor design, and some very high boots, mostly because I wanted to, but also I think it kind of mimics leg armor pretty well. The shirt he was wearing was kind of a struggle. I knew I wanted it to be silk, but didn't want it to just be a really boring, simple button-up like I had drawn it in the past. So we have this sort of robe question mark like thing. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I think I like it. Oh, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but bell silhouettes are super popular in Port St. Aurelian, which is the city Alaric lives in. So while I don't stick strictly to that, I do generally try to have a sort of waterfall shape going on with the characters from there. I think this is a lot more noticeable in Alaric's armor design, but I did try to do something like that with his cape in this design. His day clothes don't have any particular historical inspiration beyond loose, flowy clothes and boots being like something people wore in the medieval era. With clothes, I like to stray more into the fantastical than realistic sometimes, and Alaric is probably my most obvious example of that. Lastly, I want to talk briefly about Alaric's color scheme. So red and black are like the quintessential evil guy colors, but I'll be honest, when I chose them, I just chose them because I really like red and black together, and the meaning of those colors came quite a bit later. So for Alaric, red is meant to represent passion, as well as, being a bit menacing because it's red after all. And with the black, well, okay, so in Reclaimed overall, colorlessness is meant to be more of a signifier of evil than any color itself is. So that means white as well as gray and also black, but black is technically a mix of all the colors, I know this, but shh, it's fine. Basically, 0% saturation is the evil color in Reclaimed. Here's Alaric's finished designs. Honestly, he has my favorite face out of literally all of the other ones. That is my boy. That is how he looks in my head. That is my man right there. Which is incredible because I have been struggling specifically with that for so many years. It happens with all my favorite OCs. But okay, anyway, on to the next one. I believe that Aymeric is my third oldest character in Reclaimed. I designed him right after I designed his sister, Radia, and they both live in a place known to the outside world as Azandel. I specified the outside world because Azandel is located in the heart of a forest that spans an entire continent. As a baby, Aymeric was left at the very edge of this forest and was soon found by Radia's parent named Kabir, and none of them have any idea why he was left there. There was no note, no nothing, he just showed up one day. Until leaving for Alençon, Aymeric spent his entire life in Azandel. He was welcomed as one of their own and treated incredibly well, but despite that, he still couldn't help but wonder, where did he come from originally? As he gets older and comes of age, he starts feeling more and more out of place in Azandel, and as a result of that, grows a bit resentful to the place he's called home for as long as he can remember. One day he decides, fuck it, I'm gonna go find where I originally came from, and he leaves Azandel, which his sister very much disapproves of. She tries to get him to stay by telling him how dangerous it is out there, and that there's a reason that Azandel is closed off from the rest of the world. But they leave regardless, and the first nation they come across is Alençon, and that's around where Ouroboros picks up. Aymeric is generally a very easily influenceable person. In fact, leaving Azandel was super out of the ordinary for him, given how much his sister as well as Kabir wanted him to stay. So when he learns that the king is looking for knights, he thinks, well, a king has access to a lot of different types of information and therefore is probably the best lead I've got. So he immediately goes to the castle to pledge his service to Alaric. Even though I don't really show it in Ouroboros just because I didn't have time, it's actually pretty shocking to the general public of Port St. Aurelian that Aymeric did this. Alaric was specifically wanting knights from noble households, as is tradition in Alençon. So the fact that this guy had only been in town for a few days, showed up wearing clothes that nobody had ever seen anything like before, and immediately took it upon himself to say, hey, I want to be a knight of the king was a bit baffling to most nobles, to say the least. Alaric took a liking to him, though, for his sheer audacity and gladly accepted him. Aymeric is particularly skilled at stealth due to living in the forest and having to hunt for all of his life, so Alaric decided to make him his personal royal assassin, which Aymeric was perfectly fine with. He prefers to stick to the shadows anyway. And he also didn't quite understand what being an assassin entailed, given that he had never even encountered the concept before. So as time goes on, he starts doubting more and more why he's here, but that all conflicts with the fact that he started to develop feelings for Alaric. And after a while, he starts struggling with the desire to return to Azandel, as well as a desire to stay with Alaric, which just gets even more complicated after realizing what Alaric is really doing behind the scenes. Okay, that went on a little long. In terms of his design, I wanted to keep it kind of asymmetrical to represent this deep conflict he's got going on. I also wanted to make sure that I combined Elansonian elements along with Azandelian ones. For example, a tealish blue and greens in general are a huge color in Azandel, so I had him wear a tealish blue robe, as well as a tealish blue gambeson in his armored design. And then there's some red trim to represent Alanson. Aymeric did specifically request for his clothes to look like this too, as well. He did leave home for a reason. He still misses it. He wants something to remember it by. He did decide to develop a much more Elansonian silhouette though, just to fit in a little bit better. For his armor design, I decided to go with a half plate instead of a full plate, partially because I give most of my characters full plate and also because he's an assassin. It just makes a little more sense. Like, wearing any plate armor as an assassin doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's fine. It only has to make sense when I want it to. In keeping with that theme of asymmetry, I decided to give him a leather glove on one hand and the other arm is just entirely covered in plate armor. I also, and this took a while to figure out for some reason, made it so that the bottom of his gambeson was uneven, which is actually pretty similar to his day clothes design, having that bottom part be uneven and all. I realized at this point, he's wearing pretty saturated colors, all things considered. He's got plate armor on, so he needed something he could hide some of that with, so I decided to just give him a really simple black cloak, which not only helps him hide the colors he's wearing, but also helps hide his armor, which does have the Elansonian insignia on it. I haven't fully figured this out yet, but I think his cloak has some sort of magical properties to it that helps conceal his identity in some way, whether that's a visual or some kind of you look at it and it alters your perception type thing. For his weapons, I gave him 2 curved swords as well, as Aymeric, since I've created him, has always been a dual wielder. These specific curved swords take a lot of inspiration from Balasong, and forgive my pronunciation, but they're a type of Filipino curved sword. I want Azandel to be based on some kind of Southeast Asian culture, and I'm thinking I'm going to go with the Philippines, which is why Aymeric's swords are based on that, though this really isn't set in stone and could change in the future. I've kind of run out of things to say about his design now, so here's a few miscellaneous things that I don't think I can put anywhere else in this video. Okay. 1. Aymeric and Alaric's names are incredibly similar and confusing on purpose. I named them, I think, around when Elden Ring came out, and well, you got Melania, you have Melina, you have Marika, and I love Elden Ring, and I think that's funny as hell, so I'm gonna do it too. I think in Elden Ring, it's meant to show that characters are related. Aymeric and Alaric are not related at all, just to be clear. 2, basically all of my characters, except 2 or 3 are trans in some way. That includes both Alaric, Aymeric, and Lorraine, who you'll see in a little bit. There's no deep story reason or anything, I just wanted to have a majority trans cast because why not? They're my characters, and I can do whatever I want with them. Specifically, both Alaric and Aymeric are trans guys. Aymeric uses he, they, Alaric's just he, him. And then Lorraine's gender is ever-changing, so I just say that they're butch. That's it. Just butch. And her pronouns just kind of depend on my mood. Oh, Radia is also a trans woman. I really want to have her, more featured in a future video, though she was kind of at the end of Ouroboros. Okay. Here's Aymeric's finished design. While Alaric had my overall favorite face, I think Aymeric has my overall favorite, costume design. I looked at Alaric's face and said, that's my boy, and then I looked at Aymeric's clothes and said, that's also my boy. I don't think his face is perfect yet, but it's definitely getting there. I wanted him to have a slight baby face because there are a lot of trans guys with a baby face, and I really wanted to represent some of them since I think most of my trans characters tend to look pretty cis-passing, and I want to move away from that a bit. Last but certainly not least is one of my favorite characters I have ever created in terms of story, Lorraine. I actually recently did a solo D&D, not a full campaign, but just a few sessions playing as her, and it was so fun. I highly recommend you guys try out solo D&D if you have the means to. I did that because I want to base the next animatic I make around it, and I just find that method of creating a story was so much more fun than just sitting there and thinking about what would make sense. But let me get into who Lorraine actually is. The Lorraine I'm designing in this video is the grown-up version of the little girl who featured in Along Came a Spider. He's Alaric's younger sister, slash sibling, slash brother, slash whatever, who had to flee the castle at around only 10 years old. They made their way up into a kingdom known as Ivoria, and for the next 12 years they lived there with their adoptive parents, who found them huddled on a street corner just a few days after they had entered the capital, Raudara. I don't want to go too much more into depth about the specifics of what happened since I plan to have it in an animatic, but what I will say is that Lorraine kinda just wants to be left alone at this point and stay as far away from Alençon as possible. She hasn't told anybody her true name and instead goes by Loretta. That is until certain events happen, and she realizes that there is absolutely no way that she can escape from Alaric unless she does something about it. And I do mean this very literally, as Alaric is hunting her down. He believes that she's the last link between his family and the gods, and he desperately wants to sever that link. Before Lorraine's inciting incident, they were living in this place called Raudara. It's the capital of the Kingdom of Ivoria, and it's positioned in a massive cavern. It took Lorraine quite a while to get used to living there. It's underground for starters, and she comes from a very temperate seaside climate, and she found it very difficult to make friends given how different the culture was, and because she's blind. As a royal, she already was growing up pretty isolated from the outside world, but the combination of her disability and being moved to an entirely different culture really exacerbated that isolation. Eventually, they do manage to make one extremely close friend, but for the most part, they're holed up in the smithy working away at creating all kinds of tools for practice, and generally helping their adoptive family run their business. But as you can imagine, Lorraine is pretty dang traumatized, and the way that trauma is expressed is through a severe distrust of certain authority figures, as well as zero tolerance for being mistreated, whether she's actually being mistreated or just perceives to be. Throughout their teenage years especially, they became incredibly cold and hyper-defensive at all times. And only once they reached like 17 or 18 years old, they finally reached a point where they felt comfortable being vulnerable enough to make actual friends. And for a few years, minus some issues with a noble house that's pretty notorious in Raudara, they had a pretty peaceful life. So, what else could have Alaric done that was so bad that it dragged Lorraine out of a relatively peaceful life where she was comfortable and, up until a certain point, didn't even have to worry about her brother, and into a life of leading a gang of mercenaries and hunting down the last remaining member of her family? Well, I guess you'll just have to stick around and find out, cause that's all for this section, and here's Lorraine's final designs. Now I'll be moving on to rendering her. Like I said earlier, Lorraine is a very skilled blacksmith, and the reason for that being a thing is that I wanted to have her make her own armor, as well as her own weapon. So all of the armor she's wearing in her design was designed and created by her. And while she is incredibly skilled, she's not yet a master, so I still had to balance out how fancy the armor looked, and honestly, I think it still looks quite fancy compared to where her skill level should be at, but I still love it regardless. It also is specifically armor in the style of Alençon because I wanted it to be kind of like a threat to Alaric. Like, watch out, I'm coming for your throne, essentially. It's the same sort of deal with her halberd. The main weapon used in Alençon, especially by royalty, is spears. A halberd is kind of like a spear. I mean, they're both polearms after all, and it kind of harkens back to Lorraine's original weapon, which was a great axe. You may be wondering, hey, you said Lorraine was completely blind earlier. How did she manage to achieve all of this? Well, the way in which I imagine her forging stuff is by listening to it. This is kind of a niche example, but in the game Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, there's a whole mechanic where while you're smithing, along with visuals, you also hear how the metal sounds, and that helps you tell if you're doing it right or wrong. Also, during the sessions I played as them, I decided that they'd wait for the metal to cool off enough to the point where they could touch it and feel how it was shaped to see if it was correct. I don't know if that's actually how it works in blacksmithing, because like there's a lot of really specific complicated stuff surrounding temperature, but for the purposes of my fantasy story, I think it's fine. Which led me to the idea that the main way she gets around and senses things is through hearing. She just has really insane hearing, which is kind of from personal experience. I have really insane hearing to a major fault, like it's actually kind of detrimental, but it's fun to make it into not that in my fun little story. But back to the actual design process. I knew that I wanted them to have super heavy, chunky armor. One, because I think that looks awesome on butch characters, and I really wanted to emphasize Lorraine's butchness. And two, I felt that probably provides more protection, and as somebody who can't see, I figured he'd probably favor protection over mobility if it's gonna be hard for him to see blows coming anyway. The last thing I want to mention about Lorraine's armor is that it does have the original Alençonian insignias on it, which I think they would have gotten their adopted family or a friend to etch onto there once they were finished with the armor itself. I knew the absolute least about what I wanted for Lorraine's day clothes. In the past, I've drawn them in just a basic button-up and like high pants, but I was like, there's no way that that's what I'm gonna go with. It has to be more complicated than that, right? More interesting, right? Right? So I went through a bunch of different design sketches. I was like, oh, what if they wore like this long duster and these puffy pants and boots and had like a scarf or something that was like red to stand for Alençon or I don't know, something like that. And I fully colored one of these designs and very quickly realized, oh, I hate that, actually. So I went right back to the basic ass button-up and pants combo with some boots, and I was like, yep. Yeah, no, that's perfect, actually. I tried a few different colorways, mostly keeping in mind the fact that Ivoria is a desert. It's based on the Tabernas Desert in Spain, and Ivoria is based loosely on Spain as a whole. And like for the cut of the fabric and the type of fabric, I think I did a good job keeping that in mind. But then when it came to colors, I was like, you know, lighter colors would make the most sense for this, but Lorraine, I think, just looks a lot better in darker colors. So I went with the green to kind of represent Lorraine being in harmony with her curse, because she is cursed too, along with the rest of Alaric's family, of course. And then the rest of the colors are all just earthy to kind of go along with that. And then I gave her this orangey red little sash thing tied around her waist to signify her connection to Alençon, as well as Ivoria, because that is the place where she spent the majority of her life in at this point. For some context, Ivoria's colors are like gold, orange, and yellow. I actually completely forgot to mention this for her armor, but the red in the like cloth part of her design is also tinted orange for the same reason. While in contrast, Alaric is more tinted to like a cooler red or almost a pinkish color. But anyway, I once again wanted to emphasize Lorraine's butchness, and I feel like rolled up sleeves on a button up and some nice trousers are a pretty good way to do that. Like, this is an outfit I would wear in real life. Whew, okay, that was a very long recording session. Here's Lorraine's final designs. That's my butch, that's my fucking butch! I am gonna go back and re-render her face like I did with Aymeric, but I love her so much. I will also say that in these cards, the little stats I have going on are their actual stats that are gonna be in my future D&D campaign. And the little priorities bit is from a character quiz thing, originally made by C. Parasart, so thank you to that person. I have been using this little priority thing for a while now. Here's a lineup of everybody side by side. Thank you all so much for watching. I really want to make more videos like this in the future. I've always wanted to just ramble about my OCs somewhere, but have never like felt able to for whatever reason, so making this was a huge breath of fresh air for me. I also want to reiterate that my commissions are 25% off for all of December, and I also have an Etsy where I sell stickers, keychains, and prints, mostly of my original characters, but also of medieval fantasy media like Witch Hat Atelier and Baldur's Gate 3. And with the Witch Hat Atelier anime coming out, as well as Critical Role 4 just existing and being amazing, I plan to make a bunch of merch for those as well. I plan to post updates for future videos, especially my next animatic, on my community tab, so subscribe if you want to keep up to date on that. But in the meantime, I'm the most active on my Instagram. I post my art there, as well as polls and stories, and I actually posted a few polls for this video asking people which character designs they preferred more, and it was really fun. So if you want to be involved in future videos, you should totally follow me there as well. Okay, that's all. Thank you all again. Bye!